This is not going to do anything to solve our climate problems. All it's going to do is drive up costs in a state that is already increasingly one of the least affordable states in the country, and that's why people are heading to Florida. That's why people are leaving this state. And that is the single greatest threat to this state and our future viability in places like North Tonawanda and restaurants like we're standing right here today. And that's why we are opposing this. Our conference stands opposed to it. I'm certain the Assembly Conference and the Republican Conference is opposed to it. And we're calling on our colleagues in the legislature. This cannot happen without a vote of the legislature, either in the budget or in a standalone bill. And we're certainly going to call on our colleagues across the aisle to oppose this measure as proposed by the governor. And at this time, I want to call up again my colleague, a friend and someone who's been a strong voice on these issues from the Southern Tier here in Western New York, Senator George Borrello.
Thank you, Leader. How are you? It's good to be here today, and thank you very much for the invitation. You know, I've been in the Senate for a little over 3 years now. I came in on the heels of the disastrous bail reform laws that were just implemented at the beginning of 2020. But if you had told me even back then that I'd be standing here 3 years later with gas stoves as public enemy #1 in New York State, even I would have been surprised. But here we are. This is outrageous. I'm a restaurant owner myself, and I was talking to my wife about this today. You know, the whole idea of converting our businesses, not being able to cook with gas, is outrageous. And on top of that, who's going to pay for this? Now, this estimate of $276 billion doesn't hold up. We just spent an entire day yesterday in a Climate Action Council scoping plan hearing for the New York State Senate. I was there all day. They had 11 panels, roughly 36 people testifying, and not a single person could answer the question, how's this going to be paid for? Who's going to pay for it? There are a lot of interesting proposals, but in the end, there was no answer. $276 billion is a lot of money, but it's not even enough. There are 6 million homes in New York State that will need to be converted from natural gas to electricity. The average cost at a minimum is going to be $40,000. So you do the math. That's $240 billion to convert homes from natural gas to electricity. Just homes. That doesn't count commercial buildings, which we were told are the biggest polluters, if you will, the biggest source of emissions. That doesn't include everything else in New York State, all the infrastructure that will have to be improved in order to electrify. We need triple the amount of electricity than we are currently making, triple, to make this happen. No idea how this is going to happen, no plan, no cost-benefit analysis. That's what the leaders in New York State think is good for you. Good for every citizen here in New York State. Now, I asked a very important question, I thought it was a very important question yesterday, of the professor who kind of led all this from Cornell. I said, it's global climate change, right? What's the percentage that New York State contributes to global climate change? He didn't know. I said, so in 2 years of discussions, the idea that we're going to wreck New York's economy, you can't tell me how this is going to actually help global climate change? Well, the answer, which I happen to know, was 0.4%. 0.4% of global emissions come out of New York. So if we wreck our economy, we go into massive debt, we cast aside reliable forms of energy that put people's lives at risk, which is what have happened in Buffalo in this recent storm, what are we going to get for that? And the answer is nothing. And here's the dirty little secret. The dirty little secret is New York State is now importing more power than it ever has. You know, Andrew Cuomo made the promise that we were going to convert Tonawanda and Dunkirk from coal to natural gas. That never happened. Instead, they shut them down. And what did they do? Spent hundreds of millions of dollars to run transmission lines to the dirtiest old-fashioned coal plants like Homer City, Pennsylvania. That's where power for New York State is coming from. Anywhere from 18 to 50% of New York State power is coming from outside of the state, much of it from dirty old-fashioned coal plants. So this is nothing but virtue signaling, folks. This isn't going to move the needle with climate change. We're not going to improve emissions. In fact, we're going to go backwards because we're getting our power from states that have lower standards than New York. So all of this is a shell game to somehow prove that New York is the most progressive. Well, I don't want to win that contest at the expense of the lives and the livelihood of everyone in New York State, including restaurants like this. We have to push back. We have to bring common sense back to this equation, and we have to stop letting the tail wag the dog when it comes to radical proposals in Albany.